Welcome, everyone, to the Evolving Workplace podcast, a space where we explore the world of work and learn how to lead effectively and stay ready for what's next. My name is Alistair Avila, and I'm your host. Today, I'm excited to welcome Wayne Turmel, master trainer, coach, and subject matter expert on remote and the evolving workplace at the Kevin Eikenberry Group. With Wayne, we'll talk about several things today, but among the most important ones are how today's evolving workplace is impacting how we lead and manage our workforce, the timeless nature of effective leadership practices, and of course, we'll talk about AI and its potential impact on how we work, critical thinking, and communication. Wayne's been writing about how to develop communication and leadership skills for almost 30 years, and for the last 18, he's focused on the growing need to communicate effectively in remote and virtual environments. In fact, he's written 15 leadership and management books, and as a bonus, 6 fiction novels, which you can find online. Among his most well-known leadership books, you'll find Meet Like You Mean It, a leader's guide to painless and productive virtual meetings. And with Ken Eikenberry, he co-authored the Long Distance series. The Long Distance Leader was his first book, which is on rules for remarkable remote leadership. Then The Long Distance Teammate, which is on how to stay engaged and connected while working anywhere. And The Long Distance Team, on how to design your team for the modern workplace. Wayne has always been ahead of his time. In 2008, Wayne formed GreatWebMeetings.com and worked with hundreds of organizations to help people sell, present, train, and lead projects and people through emerging communication tools such as WebEx at the time. And in 2016, he merged with the Kevin Eikenberry Group to create the Remote Leadership Institute. In fact, Marshall Goldsmith calls him one of the most unique voices in leadership today. So we're honored to have Wayne with us today, and we're also honored to have you all. So please sit down and enjoy this conversation. With us today, I'm extremely excited to welcome Wayne Turmel. Wayne, welcome.
Thank you. I think you need to lower the bar on what excites you, but that's great. I'm
Well,
glad to be here, man.
well, let me tell you about what excites me. From my perspective, for a long time already, you've been thinking about the world of work and how changes in the world of work impact us as leaders, as employees. You have a wonderful 6-part series that you put together recently for the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. You've developed some pretty solid thoughts and analysis about the world of work and how it impacts us. And I can't wait for our audience to hear your thoughts and this conversation, which I'm sure will provide a lot of insights to our folks. So that's why I'm excited.
Great, let's do it.
Let's do it. So Wayne, I always like to start with some personal stories because I think it's always great for people to get to know our guests just a little bit personally. I wonder, you've had a really interesting career. You actually were a stand-up comedian for many training and development, and so that is I think the epitome of changing careers and becoming just developing a whole new identity after some time. So I was wondering if you could tell us where are you from, and how is it that this place where you're from actually helped you become the person that you are today?
Wow. I grew up in a small town called Mission, British Columbia in Canada, about 30 minutes from the American border. Uh, and, it was a small logging and farming town. And I think what that did is I developed, I got a job early. I worked, I did all that stuff, right? And even though I chose not to work in a sawmill and some of these other things, it's not like I don't know what it's like. and and I also knew growing up in that environment that one of the things that really makes me crazy is when people talk down about managers, particularly middle managers. And
Mm,
what a lot of people don't realize is that for many people, and my family was certainly one of them, middle management is an aspiration, man. It meant you were no longer holding the shovel. It was a step up when any member of our family, and I can only think of one that had a real white collar position on either side of my family. That was something to aspire to. That wasn't a joke. That was the way out of the lower middle class. And I think that has stuck with me. I'm the world's worst consultant. I'm not a big fan of CEOs and stock prices and all that stuff. Everything is I do is aimed at the person with a job just trying to get through and not lose his darn mind.
mm, mm.
And I think that's that's the biggest thing that it did for me.
That's interesting. Thank you, Wayne. It's I think your story reminds me of the importance of, the human being at work. We really couldn't get a lot of what we get done, and still, even with technology, with people, and how we treat people is very important. And
Yeah, I think part of that is just the nature of having a job. Um, we live in this world where most of us need to work for somebody else. And so there's this exchange of goods, right? I give you my time, my effort, you give me money, preferably enough money. And that's the deal. And when that deal gets shaky, as it kind of feels like it is at the moment, things get uncertain.
things get very, very uncertain. So we started with your childhood, and although I gave a little introduction to your bio and who you are, Wayne,
Mhm.
I'd love for you to tell people about what you're working on today that's really important to you, that you'd like to share with the world.
Yeah, I think that as I am far closer to the end of my career than I am at the beginning. Um, I could retire tomorrow if I plan to die Thursday. I think that this notion of what does it mean to have a job? What does it mean to work? What does it mean to put in effort and why should I? And what do I expect in exchange? That change to me is fascinating. One of the things about growing up Canadian, somebody asked me once, why are so many great comedians
That's true.
Canadian? And I think the reason is, especially growing up, 30 minutes from the border, we are used to being on the outside looking in, but we look like we're inside. Walking the street of Paris, people would be hard pressed to tell an American from a Canadian, at least until we opened our mouths.
That's right.
And I think that sense of being an observer and kind of, and in my case, being a little bit of a smart aleck observer, gives us a way of looking at the world, gives me a way of looking at the world that I think is helpful. So, as the world is going through these changes, and we'll talk about how much things have changed in just the span of my professional life, you got to be able to note it and document it and make some sense of it. And I think that's what my work is now.
And I can tell, based on the series and all the work that you've done. And by the way, just as a final point on your introduction, Wayne, I'm fascinated by the fact that not only are you a great observer, but also very creative. So I'm sure that's helped in your career. In fact, you have six novels written that are nonfiction, and I would definitely encourage everyone to go out there and take a look at those as
I
well.
would too. The
That
the
I'm sure
average
you'll
Amer
continue.
the average American male reads less than one novel a year,
Mm,
which is just insane to me. because it means that a lot of us are picking up the slack for everybody else. Uh, but we've got to, I think fiction allows me to vent that creative side that I got doing stand up and keeps me sane and allows me to say things that I couldn't say in a professional setting.
That's right. It's an outlet. It's an outlet.
It is,
So,
as
what
all creative endeavors are, right?
as all creative endeavors are, yeah. And I think there's always there's a lot of creativity that we can use at work,
Well, the thing is, you should be using your creativity at work. Otherwise, what are you doing?
right?
It is simply a transactional time for money thing, and you don't care and you don't do your best work, and your boss is not getting good exchange for what they pay you. And as a result, misery is a really career limiting emotion.
Mm,
If you're not being allowed to use your brain and God forbid have some fun, um, man, those 8 hours a day are long.
absolutely. So let me actually ask you a question about that since we're on the topic of creativity. This experience is completely anecdotal, but I wonder your thoughts on this since you've thought about this a lot in general. I a friend of mine works for a tech company, and where they use AI a lot. And and I think the caveat here is that there are a lot of fears about AI that are not that might be a little bit overblown, right? There's a lot of benefits to AI as well as, of course, challenges and potential risks. That's true of any technology. But one of his observations in the last year using AI is that people were using AI to come up um, with reasonings to the point where he became aware of when people were using AI by the
Yeah.
way the responses were provided. And when they followed up with questions to go a little deeper into the reasoning, people could not necessarily, come up with a better or an in-depth answer, right?
Right.
So I wonder your thoughts in terms of the impact that it's having on some of our, decision making, communication, and how to deal with it.
Yeah. It is 8 o'clock in the morning here, which means I am drinking the wrong beverage to have this conversation. This is a very deep three beer conversation
It is.
uh, to have about this. I am ambivalent about AI. I use it to some degree. I don't use it as much as a lot of people do. And part of that reason is I don't have to. I have been trained to think critically. I've been trained to do research. I was a broadcast journalism major. I know how to dig and uncover and confirm and do all that stuff that most people have been never taught. And as a result, I mean, give you a really simple anecdotal example. I asked ChatGPT to give me a two-paragraph bio. I needed to give a bio to somebody.
Mm,
Like I said, give me a two-paragraph bio on author Wayne Turmel, and it gave me this very well-written, very impressive bio, which, oh, by the way, contained a degree I do not have from a university I did not attend and credited me with a book I did not write.
mm,
Uh, Now, I took a look at that and went, my parents would love this, but it's patently untrue. So I'm going to not use this. But I used about three-quarters of the bio as written and changed some other stuff.
mm.
The problem is that we are not trained to think critically. We are in a hurry. And so we do what we in the newspaper or in the radio business used to call rip and read, which is news would come over the teletype, you tear it up because I'm old. You tear it off the teletype, go to the microphone, and just read the copy as written because it was written by somebody with a big job and an editor somewhere in a wire service. And you just took that news and delivered it.
Right.
And 99% of the time, that was fine. Every once in a while, something factual or something lacking context would get out, and then it was out in the world, and you couldn't really fix it. The same is true of AI. Um, I had somebody say to me, "Oh, thank goodness, there's finally a conservative AI." Because she was tired of going to AI for answers and getting answers that didn't fit her particular worldview. And I said, okay, so here's the problem with that statement. It merely proves that AI is garbage in, garbage out. It reads what is available to it and draws conclusions and makes statements based on that.
Right.
If all you're doing is cherry picking a set of information and from that you're going to have AI, you've got a problem. Um, and this is a very, very deep rabbit hole, so I'm trying not to go down it. Um, so, is AI helpful? Yes, clearly it is. Clearly it's not like anything we've ever seen. It's also changing so much about the way we work. If you look at the jobs that are most in danger of AI, they are the jobs that have always been safe. Managers, white collar jobs, jobs that used to be an entree to better jobs. Uh, we may as well get into this. 35 years ago, when I got into the business world, almost 12% of jobs had admin, secretary, assistant, something in their job description. And then the computer, internet, laptop computer revolution happened, and currently that number sits at about 5%. Now, think about all those people who started as clerks, bank tellers, secretaries, administrative assistants. And that's how they learned the job. And that's how they met the people that they were going to work with. And they figured out what interested them. And that was the entree to getting, particularly if you think about women and people of color and people who had been traditionally kept out of big jobs, those were the jobs, those were the gateway drug, right? They got them in and they networked and were allowed to show their talents and got their opportunity. Those jobs are the ones that are going away. If
Correct.
you look at when you joined a company straight out of college, you did some pretty minor kind of jobs, but you were learning the business, you were learning how business thinks, you were learning how to work in an office with other humans. There's a lot of stuff that you were learning that we're now going to have the very low level people, and then there's the creative higher level people, and that big chunk in the middle. I know the world isn't going to miss a lot more middle managers, but it's going to make it harder to make the leap from one level to another.
Mm.
Um, and so, what else is new? I was at a conference last week, and it's the first time I've been in a session that I wanted to stand up and yell BS. Um, a professor who understands AI said something that I have been hearing now for 5 years, and it's no more true than it ever was, which is,
Mm.
AI is going to get rid of a lot of the tasks that we don't want to do or that we find kind of mind numbing, and AI is going to allow us to be more human. To which I yelled in my head, that's nonsense. That's the same thing they said about the steam engine. And
Correct.
there are a lot of similarities to what's going on to what happened in the Industrial Revolution. Think about it, a steam engine, the steam loom, all the stuff that made the British Industrial Revolution happen was supposed to free humans up from the dangerous, uh, soul destroying manual work and allow them to be so much more productive and allow them to be safer and allow them to do a lot of other things. And it didn't work out that way exactly.
Mm.
Um, because the people running the Industrial Revolution, the industrialists, Uh, we're never going to say, you know what, Maggie does a wonderful job on that loom. I'm going to let her go home after 8 hours, and I really hope she writes a novel. That never happened. Um, they kept pushing and pushing. In the early days of the Industrial Revolution, people put in more time, even though they were producing more output per effort than at any other time. And without regulation and without social upheaval, we would not have an 8 hour workday and a 40-hour work week and all of those things that kind of allowed work to allow us to have something resembling a life. And I
Right.
think AI is going to do the same thing. It's going to suck up. So I heard somebody saying it wasn't me, but whoever you are, I want to give you credit, said, I don't want AI to write a novel so I can do the dishes. I want AI to do the dishes so I can write my novel.
That's right. That's right. So the
And
higher
that's
order
not, and
tasks.
remember who's funding AI. That is not what they're focusing on.
Correct. Correct. So Wayne, and I know it's hard to predict the future, but you're hinting to a reflection of what's happened with other technology. If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying it is very likely that the adaptation that occurs after AI is implemented, it's going to follow the same patterns as it did with previous technology. So, what do you think it's going to happen with AI and how it's actually going to impact the work of leaders?
It's going to get muddy and weird and potentially violent at some point, as it has. I mean, the Industrial Revolution led to uh, the rise of the Luddites. You know, let's kill the machines and get our old jobs back. There's some of that. It led to violent strikes where people were shot and died. You know, I was just watching something on TV the other night about the Homestead steel mill where, you know, the Pinkertons shot 90 people because they wanted safer working conditions, right? And this is a pattern that develops. If you think about it, so the Industrial Revolution, the 20s and 30s, 1920s and 30s, um, was a time of massive upheaval. Some people were making a buttload of money, new technologies were being introduced, but the social transactional part of work hadn't been worked out yet in a way that it was benefiting some people and seriously not benefiting others. And there were strikes and violence and a Second World War because Hitler rose to power because of the economy in Germany. And, you know, all of this happened. And then we kind of settled in. And then in the early 90s, we had the computer revolution, which again completely changed the landscape. Like I said, you know, find somebody who is a secretary or an admin assistant these days. I have had a title. I've been a manager on some level for 25 years, and I have never had an assistant. You know, whereas it used to be the first office I worked in, we basically had one assistant for every $1 million in revenue.
That's right.
So there was the receptionist at the desk, and then the salespeople had somebody who would write their letters for them and send the letters out and answer the phone and make appointments and all that stuff. And in about 1996 ish, every salesperson in America got handed this brick, this 10-pound brick of a laptop, and said, congratulations, you can now do all your own correspondence, make your own presentations, keep track of your own work, uh, do all of this stuff. Well, not only did the secretaries go away, but all of a sudden the salespeople were spending a lot more time doing stuff that they had never done before. And if you were around in that time and watched some of the early efforts at PowerPoint and read some of the emails that salespeople would send with no filter between them and the customer, it was chaos.
Hmm.
And it took years for us to settle into a new normal and a new rhythm where people didn't have assistants. And, you could take your work home with you, which was, as usual, a blessing and a curse. Um, and so we're going through something that is far more like the Industrial Revolution than the Computer Revolution,
Mm.
but it's the same pattern of, wow, this is really cool. Oh crap, I've lost my job. What am I supposed to do about this? I am cranking out way more work than I ever have, but I'm not getting more money for it. So what's up with that? Um, and this pattern happens every time there's a seismic shift in technology. And being a freak, in a way, that's kind of comforting, because we say, oh, we've never seen anything like this before. Well, we kind of have.
Mm. We have. We certainly have.
If your
So wait.
grandmother was born in 1890
Mm.
and lived 100 years, think about what she saw.
A lot.
You know?
No, absolutely. So Wayne, what we're referring to here is because whenever I think about the evolution of work, I think of a couple of things. One is that, of course, there are changes that happen,
Mhm.
but the human needs some of the basic principles of leadership, uh, of effectiveness really don't change, right? So we still have to um, hear people out, and that's sort of like a new concept, a contemporary concept, right? We have to have an
Is it
open door
though?
policy, right?
Is
So
it is it that new though? I mean,
right,
think about this.
that's where I'm
In
going. Yeah.
in ancient Greece, Demosthenes wrote an essay on how to communicate effectively. That is still the basis of every presentation skills class being taught today. There's the notion of connecting in the head, the heart, and the right. The rules for how we connect have not changed in all that amount of time. If you read Marcus Aurelius from the Roman Empire, you get, oh, so leaders who listen and have some compassion and whatever, and oh, by the way, stand firm when they need to stand firm, do better. Huh.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. So those are old and timeless, practices in communication. I think that along the way we might have forgotten about some of those, especially during the Industrial Revolution, where it was all about producing
Yeah.
widgets, and we were very much focused on how can we produce more widgets, and then it rebalanced itself now with the advent of just proper management practices, and even now COVID, right? Understand that people want transparent leadership. People want to feel that they're safe at work, which again, it's something that has been the case for a long time, but now it's even more prevalent. I think the point I'm trying to make is that I think some of those human needs don't really change, but what changes, Wayne, when it comes to the evolution of work? Why do we need to pay attention to the evolution of work? Is some of those needs are timeless?
Yeah. Well, first of all, because it's not like we ever got it right. It's like, it's not like people didn't know really early on that good bosses get better results and people don't quit and they're less miserable, right? It's not like that's a secret. When we talk about union environments, I hear this all the time. Well, I have a hard time managing because it's a union environment and whatever. And I go, yeah, that's true. That complicates things. But let me ask you this. If you look at the number of grievances and you look at the leaders who get those grievances against them,
Mm.
is there a pattern? Yes, good, empathetic, understanding leaders can still get results, but not have people filing grievances against them. Crummy bosses get lots of grievances against them.
Mhm.
That's not a coincidence. Um, and I think you're right. COVID and those things did make a difference, but there's a pendulum that swings every time there's kind of a shift in the ground. COVID, what I hear from a lot of managers is, well, COVID's over. Can I go back to holding people accountable now? Because their feeling was we let people work from home. We let them actually take care of sick relatives and maybe didn't get on their case so much. And now it's time to get back to work. Well, some of that is perception. The fact is, productivity did not diminish that much during COVID. It diminished some, certainly. But if you look at the individual worker and their output, particularly white collar, what we call white collar knowledge workers, I don't know what the new term this week is, but they still got stuff done. And so there's a movement right now among leadership, among management, to kind of try to return to the blessed before times, which, if anybody was there, were not that blessed and fabulous anyway. Um, but it's what they knew, and they could get their mitts around it. And their managers, their senior level managers, are putting incredible pressure on them. And so, yes, I think that the genie had left the bottle in terms of, we are going to have to take people's personal lives a little more into consideration, and we're going to have to do that. But the big battle right now, and unfortunately, it's the golden rule, people with the gold make the rules. What we're seeing right now is a shift to we want them back in the office. We want to know what they're doing. We want to control their time. By the way, we're firing them by the bucket load, but we still need to meet our numbers. So fewer people are doing more work. That's what AI is designed to do. Anybody who thinks companies are implementing AI out of the goodness of their heart or out of some curiosity about this is cool, let's see what it does. No, it's about how much work can we get for how little money. And that's always been the case. No employer has ever paid you more than they thought they needed to keep you working. That's the nature of our system.
Mm.
For leaders, for functional leaders, I mean, as opposed to dysfunctional leaders, I mean, leaders at the functional level, right? What we think of as middle managers, supervisors, or whatever. We're kind of in a vice because you've got the company that has a very specific set of needs, right? We need as few people paid as little as possible to crank out as much as humanly possible. That's what we need. And people are feeling their oats right now. They're like, hey, I want a little flexibility. I want to work from home a couple of days a week. And the problem is we're not talking the same language to each other. The senior leadership are making the business case. Hey, this is what we need to keep the doors open. And by the way, if the doors close, you don't get paid. Mm. And the workers are like, hey, you know what? Maybe if I wasn't totally miserable, I would do good work and you'd still get the time from me. But when they talk about things like working from home, the employees are all talking about what the employees want. I don't want to commute. I want to see my kid once in a while. You know, I go to the office and I can't get any work done because it's crazy. But you've got this group of people saying, hey, we need you in the office. And they aren't talking about what gets the best results. They aren't talking about how are we going to make this new thing, because it is a new thing in a very old package. How are we going to make this work the best for everybody? And that process, that negotiation process, is never easy. And it
It's
can
never
be
easy. Yeah.
climactic and ugly. And we're going to have the return of the Luddites, right? Who are out there with Sarah, uh, what's her name from the Terminator? Sarah Connor,
Right, Sarah Connor. Yeah.
to, John Connor blowing up Skynet. We are going to have that. We just are. Um, but the leaders, I think, need to stop and say, okay, what's going on? What are the dynamics at work? What do we need to have happen? And then how do I work with my people to make that happen in the best way? And best is open to interpretation.
It has to be defined. Yeah.
Best has to be defined. I mean, I think it's the company makes as much money as possible on their product while people aren't leaping out of windows and going insane.
Right.
That's
Right. And that's the goal. I mean, there will be companies that will provide a hybrid, model where people can, come and go. There are a lot of benefits. You can recruit people from a global perspective, so it's easier to find talent, especially in industries where talent is scarce. You could potentially increase, employee satisfaction and productivity for some jobs are balanced.
Yeah, it's interesting because there is more of that going on right now than anybody is talking about. If you look at the news, it's everything's returned to office. Amazon says go back to work. Well, yeah, Amazon is a 20th century horse and buggy model. There is a warehouse, their stuff has to go on trucks, trucks have to get to people's houses. You can't do as much as they've talked about drone delivery and all this foolishness. At the end of the day, you need people on site. You need people in the warehouse. You need people in the trucks. They're certainly not putting people in customer service, uh, but it makes sense that those people are there. Uh, the statistics on return to work are fascinating. First of all, if you look at where we were in 2019, so pre COVID, about somewhere, depending on the company, between 40 and 60% of desks were empty. I would go to people's offices. They say, "Oh yeah, remote work is great, Wayne, but we need people in the office." I go, "Then why are those desks empty?" Well, some of it was we have too many desks for the number of people we have, but mostly it was, well, so and so's kid is sick, so she's working from home. So and so's in Denver today, and so okay, so they're not in the office. How are they not remote? And it was what I called stealth remote, right? Where the HR policies never really acknowledged that people were working from home, which was not great because some bad things were kind of happening under the surface, right? Managers used ability to work from home as a perk or as a stick, right? Don't get your work done, you're not allowed to work from home. Now, after COVID, all these return to office mandates, with some notable exceptions, 60 to 40% of desks are empty. We've returned to the point where flexible work is still happening, but it's unregulated. HR hasn't necessarily gotten the policies to permit, and think about things like succession planning and career development, right? Are you only going to promote the people who are in the office every day, or are the people who are out in the field allowed to grow, be promoted, be part of the infrastructure of the company? We need to address that. If we choose not to acknowledge that reality, right, it's going to bite us. But it's also people new to the job force are in the office at a much higher percentage than people who aren't. Well, no kidding. Right? Everybody goes, oh, these Gen Zs, whatever gen they are this week. They don't want to come to the office. They all want to work remote. Well, I'm sure they do. But you know what? They need to learn the business. They need to learn what it means to work with other people. Uh, they are at an age where the social component of work is really important. Think about it. I lived in my town. I went to school. I went to college. I had all my friends in college. Now we all have jobs. And we might have jobs in other cities, or we might have jobs in other parts of town, or whatever. And so my social network at 22, 23, when your social network is what matters most to you, has dispersed. And so the social component of work becomes important. Um, don't tell HR, but in the 80s to the early 2000s, a third of long-term relationships happened at work. You either dated a coworker, you met somebody through work, you met somebody at a function, somebody had a sister, whatever it
Absolutely.
was. The
Yeah.
workplace was a really important social component. And young workers still understand that, and the ones who don't understand it still need it. Now, fast forward, I'm a 40-year-old. My kids are in school. I know my job. I'm good at it. I can do it with my eyes closed. Maybe I don't need to be in that cubicle every day
Right.
to get the
Right.
work done, to do the work that needs to be done at a level that the company is happy with and
Yeah.
whatever.
No, absolutely.
So, what we're finding is different people at different levels of their career and at different ages require different levels of flexibility.
Yeah. And I think the example, Wayne, that you provided about how do we identify, high potential, how do we do succession planning in a hybrid environment has to be, I mean, the purpose, the objective of talent management doesn't change, but how you do it effectively in this new setting does, right?
Well,
And
what you've said is the key to everything, which is what we as leaders need to do haven't changed. It just hasn't,
yeah,
right? A good boss is a good boss is a good boss and has been since, the Hammurabi Code, right? What has changed dramatically is how we do that job. And so our mindset needs to be evergreen, thinking about good leadership. But the details of how we do it change. And let me give you a simple, not so simple example, just one nobody thinks about. My career is literally as old as email. My first big boy project that I managed was rolling out email to our company.
right.
In the 30, 35, 30, however many years since, we now, unless you are doing hard manual labor, 70% of our daily work is done in writing. That has never happened in the history of humans,
Hmm.
right? Texts, Slack messages, email, reports, whatever. When was the last time any of us got any training or coaching on our writing?
Back in
That's
elementary school.
70% of our job. Now, AI is going to help with that. I have colleagues whose written communication has gotten much better in the last year. And that is not a mystery, right? Why that happens. But think about it as a leader. How am I using writing? Am I using the right message at the right time? Am I using the right tool in the right way? Right? My favorite horrible example, my wife was once fired by instant messenger.
Oh my.
Yeah, see, I love HR people's faces when I tell that story because they have the same look of horror, and deservedly so, right? But why does that happen? Well, the technology exists. I'm a terrible manager. I don't really care about my people. I don't have a lot of empathy. And here's a tool that allows me to convey the message without any of the messy people stuff.
Mm.
It worked. She was fired. He didn't have to deal with the drama.
Mm.
What did he care if she was upset? She was fired. She was no longer working. Right?
It accomplishes the job.
It did the job. technology allows us to do great things, but it also allows us to do bad things really easily and quickly. Now, firing somebody by email or by instant messenger is clearly a horrible thing. But let's take something that we've all been guilty of, which is I need to give Alistair some feedback, but it's 4 o'clock on a Thursday.
Hmm.
And you know what he's like. So I'm just going to send him an email and I'll deal with him tomorrow. Now, as a leader, am I aware that this particular piece of feedback or piece of news is not delivered best by email? Yes. Did it make my job easier in the moment? Also, yes.
Yeah. It's interesting, Wayne, because what you're speaking to here from what I'm hearing is also the importance of responsible leadership, right? And just because technology allows you to do something a certain way doesn't mean that's the right way of doing it, or
Well,
doesn't
it's
mean
that
that.
mindset again. Why
Yeah.
are you a leader? What is it you are trying to do? Good leaders understand that, yes, you have to reach outcomes, but you do that through other people.
Mm,
And then we ourselves, in the long distance leader, we talk about the 3O model: outcomes, others, and ourselves. If those aren't all working together, it's really hard to be an excellent leader. You
mm,
know, if all you're focused on is the outcomes, man, you can do some terrible things in the name of achieving those outcomes. And your boss's boss may not care as long as you get those outcomes,
right.
right? But if we get the most from others, we will achieve those outcomes. But if we don't have the right mindset, if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't learn and get better and grow in our roles, we won't get the most from those other people and we won't achieve the results. We won't get the
Right.
outcomes that we need.
Right. I just love that framework.
Yeah, it's
Really
Kevin's.
powerful. Yeah.
It's his brilliance, not mine. Uh, but if you think about that in terms of leadership and what that means, a good leader needs to be aware of the dynamics. If all you do is go down a rabbit hole and you're focused on that one thing, that everything is transactional, you won't achieve those results and you won't get any satisfaction or joy or pleasure or even a good night's sleep
Mm,
as a result.
absolutely. So Wayne, we've talked a lot about the implications for leadership. I was wondering your thoughts about implications for human resource leaders and executives in terms of how we do HR in the foreseeable future.
Oh, Lord. Again, wrong beverage, wrong time of day. Um, I, I have a problem with the word human resources. And here's the thing: what are resources? Resources are things you exploit to get results. Um, but we get work done through I don't know another word that would do that, right? To me, it's kind of like, well, we need iron for this job and we need delivery mechanisms for this job. And oh, yeah, we need people. Uh,
Mm,
the thing about human resources is at its core, what is it expected to do? I think on a tactical level, it brings people into the system, gets them ramped up, and kind of makes sure they stay there, right?
mhm. Okay.
And oh, by the way, keep the boss out of jail. Those are the four things that HR has always been expected to do. Now, it is easier to do if you are in early on the conversations,
Right.
right? I think about return to office policy. If HR is part of that discussion, the return to office policy is going to look very different than if you leave it up to your VP of sales and your IT manager. it's just, and it's always going to be a conversation because HR, like training and development, which is where I live, is always perceived as a cost. Unless you are perceived as a, and then you get terrible things like we're going to make HR a revenue generating unit. No, no, you're not. It's not going to happen. And if you do, nothing good will come of it. Um, but you have to realize that there is a cost to having people. There is a cost to bringing people into the system. There, but it's not a cost, it's an investment. And organizations that look at HR as an investment, as this is the effort we're putting in, and here's what we're getting out on the other end. Our retention is higher, our productivity is up, um, our profit margins are good. Then investing in HR makes sense. If all you do is look at HR as the principal, and if somebody's bad, they'll get sent to the principal's office, um, then you're not being thought of as an investment. You're thought of as a cost, and you can be replaced by AI. I was at a conference last week. The number of AI role play technology that is out there.
Tremendous.
Teaching managers,
Coaching. Yeah.
coaching by AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, let me know how that works for you in the long run. Um, so we'll see, but it's and I've never said this out loud before, so it's, as I'm saying it, I'm formulating the thought. But this notion of HR as an investment versus a cost is, I think, what's going to differentiate. And those HR leaders who can make the case that they are an investment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think what you're speaking to, Wayne, is the evolution of HR that we've seen for the last, 30, 40 years, where before it was very much seen, it used to be the good old personnel office,
Hmm.
mostly focused on compliance. And, with the advent of studies in HR, especially when it comes to talent development, and later on IO or at the same time IO psychology, and all of these things, just refining um, performance, or how we get to perform better, how we get to lead better. I think HR in some industries and some companies have become that sort of investment type of organization. Um, but I feel like we're at an inflection point with some of the technology available to us. We just heard last week that Moderna combined HR with their technology team because of the work that the CHRO had done to identify how jobs could be, parts of jobs could be automated and how they could be enhanced, and so on and on. So we have to be attentive to those developments and really start thinking about what does this mean for us, and how can we make the employee experience better with the technology available to us? Because I also have my sense is that people's expectations are changing. Our employees' expectations are changing from
They
for the
are.
company that we're going to be working at.
They absolutely have. Well, the social contract of what does an employer owe its employees, what does an employee owe its employer, um, is undergoing a massive, massive shift, and nobody really knows the answer to this.
Hmm.
Um, and so that's going to be a big piece of it. I heard something at this conference, and I heard a couple of people say it, which means enough people believe it that we need to pay attention to it, which is we need to start thinking about when we introduce AI to our team that AI is the new teammate, that it is not, and as managers, we're going to need to manage both the people resources and the information
Mm.
resources.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
we're going to have to manage the facilitation and the connection between those two and the outputs that we're getting. So that's going to make uh, things really interesting. It's
Really
also going to
interesting.
make the Christmas party kind of sad. you
It
know,
will be, because
but
then who do you invite?
exactly.
Well, Wayne, I have to, thank you for this conversation. I think we ended up talking a little bit philosophically about HR and about the world of work, which I think it's necessary. Those are the types of conversations that I think will lead to new perspectives and ways of thinking about this. And I so appreciate the work that you're doing in this space. And I have a feeling, if you don't mind, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. I'd love to, at some point in the future, if you're available, to continue this conversation, because I think we were delving into some new things here at the end of our conversation that I'd
Oh
love
no,
to
don't
tap your
make me
brain
talk
into.
about stuff that I obsess about. Oh no, don't do that.
Okay, I hear you're open to it.
Anytime, man.
All righty. Wayne, thank you so much. Before we go, just want to make sure, where can people find you, and how can they connect with you if they'd like to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, clearly, my employer is the Kevin Eikenberry Group. That is a good place to start, kevineikenberry.com. I have a every 2 weeks blog post in there. Um, you can see the work that we do, and it's an easy way to reach me. Uh, if you just heard something intriguing and want me to be in your orbit, LinkedIn is always a safe bet. I'm happy to expand my network. So LinkedIn is good. That's, in terms of work, man, that's it. If you go to wayneturmel.com, it's just all my novels and my writing and my creative stuff. You're welcome to stop by there too. God forbid you order The Long Distance Leader and, one of my other
Oh, that
books,
would be
but
interesting. I
that,
love that.
you know,
Well,
there's nothing says you can't. But yeah, it just kevineikenberry.com, Wayne at kevineikenberry.com is my email there. It's out there for the world. And LinkedIn is probably the easiest.
awesome. Well, Wayne, again, thank you so much. And I'll make sure to put a link to the recent Evolving Workplace series that you put out, so people can get a little bit more information about this important topic. Wayne, again, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful week, and keep doing the great work that you're doing.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you. You too.